Hey there, it's Ken Kunin, FastingRipped50. This week I got a message via my Instagram account. On Instagram, my moniker is Mr. Kunin. And the message basically was along the lines of, hey Ken, it looks like this FastingRipped50 stuff is doing well for you. You look good for 50 and it's good that your clients are getting a result, but I don't know anything about you. So can you let us know a little bit about where you're from and what you do with the FastingRipped50? So maybe that will encourage me to find out more and see if there's something that will work out. And that's a fairly confrontational message in the sense that it makes you examine your own life. And I am a huge autobiography fan, so I thought about it during the week, and I thought, you know what, fair call. People have an idea. It's good to let them in, sort of to see this was my trip to get to where I am today. These are the steps and the path that I took. And hopefully those steps can offer you some insight and maybe get you a little bit healthier, a little bit fitter in a soulful way. Additionally, because I am a huge fan of the autobiography, I want to know about yourself and I want to know about the person across the road, etc. One of the things that brings me great joy in life is the connection with other people, when people can feel empathy towards one another, I should say. Additionally, it's when you can learn from other people. To me, when you ask someone, what did you learn this week? And if the answer is nothing, I think, what a wasted week. So I think that when you have that capacity to connect with people, that's also when you learn from people. And I think that that's when we grow as human beings. All right, so how am I going to divide this up? I thought about this, and I think I'm going to do this video in a couple different segments. And the first segment will basically be from birth all the way through to the end of junior high school. And where I grew up, junior high school was grades 7, 8, and 9, which takes me to about 14, 15 years old. All right, so Kenneth Allen Kunin was born in 1968. I was born in Encino, California. I grew up in 5 minutes away in Tarzana, California. That's part of the San Fernando Valley. You've probably heard it in movies like, hey man, go back to the valley. Anyways, that's an area, part of Los Angeles, the greater part of Los Angeles, about 15, 20 minutes away from Hollywood, about 20, 25 minutes away from Santa Monica, to give people some reference. What a great time and place to grow up. You know, you're lucky to be born where you're born, provided it's a good place, and to who you're born. And I was born, my parents were two people that always put family first. Education meant a great deal to them. Compassion meant a great deal to them. So I was very lucky in that regards. I also have two brothers, which I'll go into in a few moments. I want to start with my parents. Samuel Kunin, that's my father. That was my father. He passed about 6 years ago of cancer. He grew up in Chicago to Jack and Edith. Not an easy situation. He was the third of three kids. He came 7 years after his middle sister. His oldest sister was 11 years older. And he was certainly, an accident. And the joke in a Jewish family was they called him Baby Jesus because he sort of came out of nowhere. And his parents, they did it tough. His father was a salesman that when he worked, he probably did okay, but he wasn't someone that stuck to anything for an overtly long period of time. And because of that, there wasn't a lot of stability. His father also had type 1 diabetes and had horrific food habits, and of course exercise wasn't something that was thought of, smoked a lot of cigars, and he wasn't ever going to live a real long time. His mother, Edith, she was a seamstress, and that was good because that extra money that she made sewing probably just put enough food on the table. And I think because food was an issue, it's something that actually plagued my father for many years. While he developed so much in his life, that was definitely something that he fought. He was heavy for a lot of his life, and you could see that food played an important part of what was important to him. And of course, when you're hungry, everything's food related is going to be important, but it affects you long term. My mom, her upbringing was a lot smoother. It really was. She was born to Jonas and Shirley Sack. They were probably, say, upper middle class in the way that she was raised. She probably never really went without. That said, there was nothing that would have been extravagant either. One thing I can tell you is that Jonas was in the real estate game and he retired too early. He retired at 55. And I say this because he was the first person in the family that I knew of that suffered from Alzheimer's and dementia. And my mom at 80, she also suffers that. At 55, Jonas just stopped working because he had enough dough to just make it. And I don't think that was a good thing. All right, fast forward. These two people, they collide in Chicago as camp counselors. They court one another. They're both going to university in that part of the world. They get married. They go on a honeymoon. They find that California is the land of milk and honey. And they say, screw this. What are we living in the cold for? We're moving to California. So I grew up in this time and place, essentially in the 70s. I was born in 68, but I grew up in the 70s for all intents and purposes. And it was the land of opportunity. It was a place that if you could dream it and you could be industrious and work hard enough, that there was a reasonable chance that you were going to succeed. And I saw that. And I was very lucky also to have parents where you could tell that being parents meant something to them. It wasn't something like, yeah, no, we've got 3 kids, whatever, they'll look after themselves. They always put education way up there. They always obviously looked at the cohesive family as being the most important part of their life. And my father was fortunate in that he would tell you that he wasn't the smartest guy that was in med school, but he worked his way through to med school and became a urological surgeon. What did that mean for me growing up? Besides being the brunt of a few jokes, having a father that was a urological surgeon, pecker checker, cock doc, PPMD, all these things were said all the time. It meant that I grew up in a stable household where we didn't have to deal with that. We weren't rich per se. We probably were comparatively to a lot of people in other places in the world. But my parents always instilled upon myself and my brothers a good work ethic. They weren't going to just give it to you. You had to go. I had part-time jobs from the time that I was 12 or 13 years old. That was something that was always brought along the way. In terms of physicality, I was the third of 3 boys. So oldest brother, Gordon, he's 6 years older than myself. He's actually currently a rabbi. Yeah. My middle brother, Douglas, he 3 years older than myself. He's a psychologist. He used to be a film editor. And then there's myself, who used to be a musician and have been still in music, but also have worked within the fitness industry for, this is the 3rd decade. So when I get to Los Angeles and it's time to have dinner with my brothers, it's always a very interesting and philosophical conversation. I was an average student. That's probably the best way that I can put it. I was good with sport. That was definitely something that took my interest early in the piece. Loved movies, loved music as well. Having a brother that was 6 years older was good because you had the influence of some pretty cool music along the way. And I think that art is a crucial part of who I am. And I think that if you can express yourself in this life via an artistic passion, that you're pretty fortunate as well. So again, good at baseball, pretty reasonable at basketball, things like tennis, golf, street hockey. Again, hand-eye coordination. Being the youngest of 3, I had to be pretty tough because you got your ass kicked pretty regularly. And also worth noting that when I look at my sort of physical self at that point, I was a very late developer. I was very small throughout, all the way up until about 16, 17 years old. I think it was grade 11 or 12 where I had a big growth spurt. I went from 5'4" to 5'11". So, but what it forced me to do was try to get the most out of what I had. And while I was strong, I was certainly little, and it made me tough. As far as schooling, I really enjoyed the first 4 years of kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Went to a great school that was down the road, and then for some reason, I went to a slightly arty school for grade 4, 5, and 6, but that was pretty cool. That was called Castlemont, as I recall. Then I went to a junior high school, which I'm not going to name, which was essentially the worst 3 years of my life. While sport was okay, just didn't get on the page with what they were doing academically, didn't have a lot of interest, got myself into a fair bit of trouble. But that said, I somehow exited trouble at about the same time, if that makes sense. So I certainly was up to it in grade 7, 8, and 9, but then when I get to grade 10, which I'll start next week, martial arts kicked in, and that changed a lot of things. Also worth noting, in my household, my parents were very social, and they had an unbelievable collection of friends, which says a lot about who you are. And that's something that as a parent today that you take on board. You think when you bring other people into your house and that they're you're friends with, they'll hopefully have some influence on your friends' kids. And that was definitely the case. What I can say consistently about my parents' friends were, besides being fairly successful, they were compassionate and they were never arrogant. That was one thing. My parents were a good judge of character. If they were arrogant, they weren't likely to be in our house. So I grew up around a cool cast of characters in a lively town where anything was possible, and I had to be tough and fend for myself. We'll get back into grade 10 onward next week. If you haven't taken a moment yet to do so, make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Make sure that you hit that notification bell so you can be kept up to date on everything that's Fasting Ripped 50 and a little bit of my story, and we'll find out a little bit along the way, hopefully a lot of it along the way, about your story. Any questions that you have, put them in the comments below and we'll get you. All right, enjoy the week.